Your grandmother never threw away the last sliver of a bar of soap. She collected those little scraps in a dish by the sink, waited until she had a handful, and then she did something that most people alive today have never even considered. She boiled them. She grated those leftover pieces into a pot of hot water, stirred them down over a low flame for 10 or 15 minutes, and poured the result into an old bottle. Just like that, she had liquid hand soap, homemade body wash, or an all-purpose cleaner that cost her nothing at all. No trip to the store, no plastic pump bottle with a $7 price tag, no ingredient list that reads like a chemistry exam. 1 bar of soap, some hot water, and the kind of common sense that used to be so common nobody even thought to write it down. That is the first of 25 household tricks your grandmother knew by heart. Most of them use things you already own. All of them worked for generations before the cleaning products industry convinced us we needed a separate bottle for every surface in the house. The average American household now spends somewhere between $600 and $800 a year on cleaning supplies. Your grandmother spent a fraction of that and kept a cleaner house. She did not have a cabinet full of specialty sprays with color-coded labels. She had vinegar, baking soda, lemons, salt, soap, and the accumulated wisdom of every woman who came before her. What follows are 25 pieces of proof that she was right all along. The soap boiling trick alone is worth pausing on, because the math is almost embarrassing. A single bar of soap costs about $1. Grate it into hot water with 15 minutes of gentle stirring. That bar produces enough liquid soap to fill 3 or 4 pump bottles. A comparable amount of liquid hand soap from the store runs about $12 to $15. You are paying roughly 12 times more for the convenience of someone else doing the dissolving for you. And the homemade version contains the same active ingredient. Nothing more, nothing less. Once you have turned those soap scraps into liquid, the uses multiply fast. Mix that dissolved soap with a tablespoon of baking soda and a tablespoon of washing soda, and you have a laundry detergent that handles a full load for less than a dime. But here is the thing most people miss about bar soap. Even before you boil it, a dry bar of soap sitting unwrapped in a dresser drawer will keep that drawer smelling fresh for years. Not months. Years. The scent slowly releases from the bar as long as it stays dry, and it absorbs moisture at the same time, which means your stored linens stay fresher in 2 ways at once. Your grandmother did not need a lavender sachet from a catalog. She had a bar of ivory and a sock. Soap also fixes stuck zippers. If you have ever wrestled with a jacket zipper that refuses to budge, rub a dry bar of soap along both sides of the teeth, let it sit for a minute, and work the slider up and down. The soap lubricates the metal without staining the fabric. It works on squeaky door hinges, too. Wedge a damp bar between the door frame and the hinge, swing the door back and forth a few times, and that squeak disappears. People pay $4 or $5 for a can of spray lubricant to do the same job that a 40-cent bar of soap handles just fine. This kind of knowledge gets tracked down every single week. Methods that worked for generations got dismissed and are now being quietly rediscovered by the same people who ignored them. If this is the kind of thing that matters to you, and you are not yet subscribed, now is a good time. We are just getting started here. Now, here is one that sounds almost too simple. If you are driving screws into hardwood, and the wood keeps splitting, or the screw keeps stripping, drag the screw threads across a bar of soap before you drive it in. The soap coats the threads just enough to let them bite into the wood without forcing the grain apart. Carpenters have been doing this since at least the 1800s. It works on nails, too. Rub the tip across soap before hammering, and the nail slides through the lumber like it is moving through warm butter. But soap is just the beginning of what your grandmother kept in her cleaning arsenal. White vinegar was the other half of the operation. A spray bottle filled with equal parts vinegar and water cleans windows, mirrors, countertops, bathroom tile, and stovetops. Vinegar is a mild acid with a pH around 2.4, which means it dissolves mineral deposits, cuts through soap scum, and kills most common household bacteria on contact. A gallon of white vinegar costs about $3. That same gallon, diluted, replaces at least 4 or 5 bottles of specialty cleaners that would cost you $20 or more combined. Your grandmother cleaned her windows with that vinegar solution and then wiped them down with a crumpled sheet of newspaper. For decades, from roughly the 1920s through the 1990s, this was considered the gold standard for streak-free glass in American households. The paper fibers were thick, dense, and highly absorbent, and the old petroleum-based ink acted as a light abrasive that polished the surface as you wiped. Women traded this tip at church suppers and across backyard fences like it was a state secret. Now, in fairness, this one comes with a caveat, and being honest about it is part of the deal. Modern newspapers are printed on thinner, cheaper paper with soy-based ink. Brad Robertson, the president of the Glass Doctor Home Repair Company, noted that today's newspapers deteriorate quickly when wet and can leave newsprint spots on your windowsills and mirror frames. So if you try this today and end up with smudges, it is not your technique. It is the paper. A microfiber cloth with that same vinegar solution will give you streak-free results every time. But the vinegar itself has not changed one bit. It still works exactly the way it did when Eisenhower was president. Speaking of vinegar, here is one your grandmother probably used once a month without thinking twice about it. Pour half a cup of baking soda down a slow drain. Follow it with a cup of white vinegar, and stand back. The chemical reaction between the acid and the base produces carbon dioxide gas, which fizzes and expands through the pipe, loosening grease, soap residue, and whatever else has been quietly building up in there. Wait 10 minutes, then flush with boiling water. A chemist at Virginia Tech pointed out that the two ingredients essentially neutralize each other once the reaction stops. So the real cleaning power comes from the fizzing action itself and the hot water flush afterward. In other words, timing matters. You want to pour the vinegar right on top of the baking soda and let the reaction do its work while it is still bubbling. If your grandmother ever handed you a box of baking soda and told you to put it in the refrigerator, she was not being eccentric. Baking soda absorbs odors because its alkaline structure neutralizes acidic odor molecules. One open box in the back of the fridge, replaced every 2 to 3 months, keeps the inside smelling clean without any sprays or deodorizers. It also works inside shoes, gym bags, and car interiors. Sprinkle some on car upholstery, let it sit for 15 minutes, vacuum it up, and the smell is gone. But here is where it gets interesting. Your grandmother also knew that baking soda makes an incredibly effective stain remover. Mix 3 parts baking soda with 1 part water to form a thick paste. Spread it over a stain on a countertop or inside an oven, and let it sit for 15 to 20 minutes. The mild, abrasive texture of the powder scrubs away grime without scratching most surfaces, and the alkaline chemistry breaks down grease at the molecular level. A professor at Oregon State University's chemistry department confirmed that, as a base, baking soda dissolves organic compounds like dirt and grease, and its mineral structure provides a gentle scrubbing action that cleans without leaving scratches behind. Sidney Morse wrote about this exact technique in his 1908 book, Household Discoveries, recommending baking soda paste for everything from soot-stained walls to tarnished silverware. The staff at the Living History Farms in Iowa tested his recommendations on a blackened wall in a 1900-era house and reported that the results were tremendous. They said it was like Morse invented the magic eraser 100 years early. The fact that the same advice works over a century later tells you something about how good it was to begin with. We replaced it with a shelf full of products that expire, leak, and come in containers you cannot recycle. If your grandmother used to do something like this, or if you grew up in a house where these tricks were just part of daily life, say something in the comments. A lot of you carry knowledge that has never been written down anywhere, and the comments section might be the only place it gets preserved. If this brought back a memory of someone in your family who had their own way of doing things, tell us about it. Now let us talk about something your grandmother probably did without even thinking of it as a hack. She polished her silver with toothpaste, not gel toothpaste. Plain white paste, the kind with a mild abrasive like baking soda or silica built into it. She squeezed a small amount onto a soft cloth, rubbed it gently into the tarnished surface, rinsed it with warm water, and dried it with a clean towel. The whole thing took 5 minutes, and the silver came out looking like it had been professionally cleaned. The abrasives in the toothpaste are fine enough to remove tarnish without scratching the metal underneath. You can spend $12 on a jar of specialty silver polish, or you can use the tube that is already sitting on your bathroom counter. Here's another one that sounds like a folk tale until you try it. If you scratch a piece of wood furniture, grab a raw, shelled walnut from your pantry. Not roasted, not salted, not candied. Raw, the roasting process dries out the essential oils, and salted nuts will only scratch the finish further. Rub the meat of the nut directly into the scratch, pressing firmly enough to release the natural oils. Then, buff the area with a soft cloth. The oils from the walnut seep into the exposed wood grain, darkening the scratch to match the surrounding surface. One woman found a 90-inch antique pine table at a flea market for $80, covered in scratches, and repaired the entire surface with a handful of walnuts in under 10 minutes. She described the results as kind of addictive. It does not work on deep gouges or lacquered finishes, but for the light scratches that accumulate on a dining table or hardwood floor over the years, it is remarkably effective. The whole repair takes about 60 seconds and costs you 1 walnut. A bottle of commercial scratch repair runs $8 to $15 and often leaves the wood looking worse than the scratch did. Your grandmother also knew that salt was not just for cooking. If she spilled grease on a wooden floor, she poured cold water on it immediately. The cold water made the grease congeal before it could soak into the wood grain, and she wiped it up clean. On a greasy cast iron pan, she used coarse salt as a scrubbing agent instead of soap because soap strips the seasoning layer that makes cast iron nonstick. A handful of salt, a stiff brush, a quick rinse, and that pan was ready for the next meal. Salt also keeps your salt shaker flowing freely. This one is almost too simple to mention, but it works. Drop a few grains of uncooked rice into your salt shaker. The rice absorbs moisture from the air inside the shaker, which prevents the salt from clumping. Restaurants have been doing this for decades. The reason it works is that rice is a natural desiccant. It pulls humidity out of the air around it, which is the same principle behind the old trick of putting a wet phone in a bag of rice. That phone trick does not actually work very well, by the way, but the salt shaker trick works every single time. We spent a long time putting together a guide for people like you. People who understand that the old ways worked and who want all of this in one place, organized, detailed, and ready to use. If you're watching on your phone or computer, the link is right below. If you're watching on your TV, grab your phone and point the camera at the code on screen. Every year, more of this disappears. This is how we make sure it does not. Now, here is one that most people have completely forgotten. If you get a splinter lodged deep enough that tweezers cannot reach it, take a small piece of moistened bar soap and press it over the splinter. Cover it with a bandage and leave it overnight. By morning, the soap has softened the skin and drawn the splinter closer to the surface, making it easy to pull out with tweezers or even your fingernails. Families in Appalachia have been using this method for generations. One woman from the Smoky Mountains, born in 1917, reportedly used softened soap poultices to draw out everything from wood splinters to boil infections. Her family swore it worked better than anything a pharmacy could offer. Baking soda paste does the same thing through a slightly different mechanism. A quarter teaspoon mixed with water and spread over the area causes the surrounding skin to swell just enough to push the splinter toward the surface. Modern medicine has largely replaced these remedies with sterilized needles and antibiotic ointments, and for serious infections you should see a doctor without question. But for a stubborn splinter on a Saturday afternoon, when the doctor's office is closed, and you do not want to dig around with a sewing needle, the soap trick still works just the way it always has. Your grandmother also knew that a lemon could clean more than you would think possible. Cut a lemon in half, sprinkle coarse salt on the cut surface, and use it to scrub a wooden cutting board. The salt acts as an abrasive, and the citric acid in the lemon kills bacteria and neutralizes odors. When she was done, that cutting board smelled like nothing at all, not like garlic, not like onion, not like the fish she had prepared on it an hour earlier, just clean wood. She also used lemon juice to remove stains from her hands after working in the garden or the kitchen. If you have ever tried to wash the smell of onion off your fingers with regular soap and failed, try rubbing your hands with a cut lemon. The acid breaks down the sulfur compounds that cause the smell. Then there is the old trick of using a damp cloth instead of a dry one when you dust. This seems obvious, but an enormous number of people still dust with a dry rag and then wonder why the dust just floats around the room and settles back down an hour later. A slightly damp cloth creates just enough surface tension to trap dust particles instead of scattering them. Your grandmother knew this instinctively. She also knew to dust from the top of the room down, because gravity is not optional. Here is one for anyone who has ever spilled candle wax on a tablecloth or a piece of furniture. Do not try to scrape it while it is still warm. Let it harden completely first. Then, lay a sheet of brown paper or a plain brown paper bag over the hardened wax. Set your iron to its lowest heat setting, no steam, and press gently over the paper. The heat melts the wax just enough to liquefy it, and the paper absorbs it as it softens. Lift the paper, and the wax comes with it. This trick also works for wax drips on carpet, which is where it really earns its reputation. You may need to repeat it once or twice for thick drips, but it pulls the wax out cleanly without damaging the fibers underneath. The key is patience and low heat. Too much heat can push the wax deeper into fabric instead of pulling it out. Mayonnaise on wood furniture sounds like a mistake, but it is actually one of the most reliable ways to remove water rings from a finished wood surface. You know those white rings that appear when someone leaves a cold glass on the dining table. without a coaster. That white mark is moisture trapped beneath the finish, and it drives people crazy because it looks permanent. Apply a small dollop of regular full-fat mayonnaise directly onto the white ring, spread it with your finger to cover the mark completely, and let it sit for several hours or overnight. Wipe it off with a clean cloth in the morning. The oils and fats in the mayonnaise penetrate the finish and displace the trapped moisture that causes the white mark. It does not work on every finish, and it will not fix a ring that has been there for years and has penetrated into the wood itself. But for a fresh water stain on a varnished table, the kind you notice the morning after a dinner party, it works more often than it does not. We now sell specialty products for this exact problem that cost $10 to $15 a bottle. Mayonnaise costs about $4, and you can put it on a sandwich afterward. Your grandmother had her own furniture polished too, and she made it from two things she already kept in the kitchen: 2 parts olive oil, 1 part fresh lemon juice. Mixed together in a small bowl, this combination cleans, conditions, and adds a soft shine to wood surfaces without any of the silicone or petroleum distillates found in commercial furniture sprays. The olive oil moisturizes the wood and restores the luster that years of drying air strips away. The lemon juice cuts through surface grime and leaves behind a clean, bright scent that fills the room. It smells like a kitchen in the south of France, and it costs almost nothing to make. The only thing it does not do is leave a waxy residue on your furniture, which, depending on your perspective, is either a limitation or a feature. Somewhere, right now, there is someone in your life who would want to hear every word of this. A sibling who keeps a garden. A friend who has always believed the old ways had something that modern shortcuts are missing. A neighbor who remembers how things used to be done. Send it to them. You will not need to explain why. They will understand the moment it starts. Here is one that pet owners need to hear. If your couch is covered in dog hair or cat fur, and your lint roller ran out 3 days ago, pull on a rubber dishwashing glove and run your hand across the upholstery. The friction between the rubber and the fabric creates static electricity, which lifts the hair off the surface and rolls it into little clumps you can pick up easily. If you dampen the glove slightly, the effect gets even stronger because the moisture increases the surface grip without soaking the fabric. This is not a new invention. Grandmothers with cats and dogs have been doing this for as long as rubber gloves have existed. One woman described the effect as watching order return, one sweep at a time, because the hair rolls up into neat little tumbleweeds that cling to the rubber. It works on car seats, curtains, lampshades, and even clothing. A 10-pack of rubber gloves costs about $6 and lasts for months. A box of lint roller refills costs about the same and is gone in a week if you have a golden retriever. Your grandmother also knew that hanging white sheets and linens outside in direct sunlight is the most effective natural bleach there is. Ultraviolet light breaks down the chemical bonds in stains and yellowed fabric, whitening them without any chlorine or chemical bleach. Cloth diaper users have known this for generations. Stains that survive the washing machine disappear after a few hours on a clothesline in July. For an extra boost, your grandmother would spritz the stained areas with a mixture of lemon juice and water before hanging them out. The citric acid combined with the UV light works almost as well as commercial whiteners, and it leaves the fabric smelling like clean air instead of chemicals. We just stopped doing it because the dryer was faster. If your garbage can starts to smell in the summer heat, do not reach for a chemical deodorizer. drop a fresh sprig of mint into the bottom of the can. Mint releases volatile oils that overwhelm and neutralize foul odors naturally. If you do not grow mint, baking soda works too. Sprinkle a generous layer on the bottom of the can before you put in a new bag. Either way, the solution costs pennies and lasts for days. Chalk is another one of those household tools that most people have forgotten about. If you get a grease stain on a piece of clothing, rub a stick of plain white chalk directly into the stain before washing. The calcium carbonate in the chalk absorbs the oil, pulling it out of the fabric fibers the same way a sponge pulls water off a counter. Let it sit for 10 minutes. Brush off the chalk dust and wash normally. The stain comes out far more easily than it would with detergent alone. This works on cotton, linen, and most synthetic blends. Cornstarch does the same thing if you do not have chalk handy. Here is one that every household with bread should know. If you drop a glass on the kitchen floor and it shatters, do not rely on a broom to get every piece. A broom catches the big fragments, but the tiny, nearly invisible shards scatter across the floor and lodge in grout lines and crevices where bristles cannot reach. After you sweep up the large fragments, press a slice of soft white bread firmly across the floor where the glass broke. The bread is soft enough to conform to every surface irregularity and sticky enough to grab those microscopic slivers that would otherwise end up in someone's bare foot 3 days later. The same thing works with a dampened paper towel, but bread does the job better because its texture molds around the shards instead of sliding over them. Your grandmother also knew what to do with stale bread before it went to waste entirely. She rubbed it against wallpaper to lift fingerprints, pencil marks, and light grease stains. The gluten in the bread acts as a gentle adhesive that picks up surface grime without damaging the paper underneath. This technique appeared in housekeeping manuals going back to the 1800s, when a common recipe called for cutting a 2-day-old loaf into 8 pieces and rubbing it against the wall in half-yard strokes, starting at the top and working down until the paper looked almost new. One more that deserves its own moment. If you have ever wondered why your grandmother kept a box of used dryer sheets under the sink instead of throwing them away, it is because she knew they repel dust. Run a used dryer sheet along your baseboards, blinds, ceiling fan blades, and the tops of door frames. The anti-static coating on the sheet leaves behind a thin residue that prevents dust from settling on those surfaces for days, sometimes weeks. It is the same principle that keeps your clothes from clinging together in the dryer, applied to your house instead. A box of dryer sheets costs about $4, and every single sheet gets used twice, once in the laundry and once on the furniture. That kind of thinking is what separated your grandmother's generation from ours. Nothing was single use. Everything had a second life. And finally, this might be the most quietly brilliant of all 25. Your grandmother kept a small jar of rice near the stovetop and in several other places around the house. Not to cook, to dry things. If she had a pair of wet work gloves, she buried them in the rice overnight, and they came out dry by morning. If a container lid would not seal because of moisture, she wiped it with a cloth she had stored in the rice jar. Rice pulls moisture out of everything it touches because each grain can absorb up to 30% of its own weight in water before it even feels damp. That is not a guess. That is the actual absorption capacity of uncooked white rice. Put a handful in a container with your good silver, and it prevents tarnish by keeping the air dry around the metal. Put it in a toolbox, and it slows rust on your wrenches and drill bits. Tuck a small cloth bag of rice into a camera bag or a box of old photographs, and it protects everything inside from humidity damage. Your grandmother understood moisture the way a mechanic understands oil. She knew it was the invisible enemy of everything she was trying to preserve, and she fought it with a grain that cost less than a penny per handful. We now buy silica gel packets and electronic dehumidifiers to do the same job she handled with something she bought in a 5-pound bag at the grocery store. 25 tricks, and not one of them required a trip to a specialty store, a subscription, or an internet search. From boiled soap to a handful of rice, from a walnut rubbed across a scratch to a lemon pressed into a cutting board, every single one of these methods was passed down through families who understood something we are only now starting to remember. The simplest solutions are usually the ones that last. And if this is your first time here, welcome. This is what we do. We go back and find the things that worked before the modern world decided it knew better. Pull up a chair and stay a while. If any of this made you think twice about how things used to be done, leave a like, subscribe if you have not already, and share this with someone who still believes the old ways had it right.